Good evening, everyone. So my name's Ian Butterworth, and I work at the National Physical Laboratory, which is in Teddington. Some of you may have know about it, and we also have Gianluca here. So we both work in acoustics, and what I'm going to be talking about is seeing sound. Okay, so that's supposed to sound quite fun. I'm hoping that it will show you in the first 3 slides that it actually can be quite fun. So my first 3 slides are going to become progressively more interesting. Okay, so my first slide is yellow, and it shouldn't be. Okay, so this is basically standing waves. So when you set off low frequency sound in a room or in a solid cavity, you excite what are called different resonances or modes of the room. Now, what you see on the top is the lowest frequency mode. So imagine at the walls, the pressure is always 0, and in the middle, the pressure will fluctuate up and down. It's like holding a string, and the string moves up and down and resonates. So that's the first mode. And the second mode, as you go down, is where one side goes up and down alternately, much like you'd imagine a slinky, and then the third and the fourth. Okay, so a way to visualize this is something called a Rubens tube. Okay, so if you've heard of this, so this is getting a little bit more interesting. So this has, it's an empty tube with a speaker on one end, and on the other end you pump flammable gas into the tube. And you drill a series of holes along the line of the tube, and you set a light to the gas along the top. Okay, so it's not very safe for this. So I thought what we do. Well, you can see on the tube up there, you can see the different resonances being visualized. So in a sense, that's seeing sound. So that tube is resonating, and by looking at the amount of gas that's forced out because of the sound waves, we're able to see the areas in which the pressure is high and the intensity is high, and then the areas that it's low. Okay, so I thought I'd do a safer option. So this is what you might call playing. So this is kind of still science, but I knocked this up the other day. Haven't tried it before a couple of days ago, so hopefully this is going to be okay. So what we have is a speaker in a hollow tube with 2 rigid ends. Okay, so the sound is going to resonate inside this cavity, and at the bottom I have some styrofoam balls out of a bean bag. Okay, so what I'm going to do is going to turn the sound up that's radiating out of that speaker. Okay, so here I'm at 100 Hertz, so it's a relatively low frequency sound. If I go lower than this, there's not much. That speaker's still radiating, and there's still a very high intensity sound wave kind of inside this, but it's not setting up as a standing wave. So it doesn't have these kind of localized regions of high intensity and low intensity. It's relatively similar throughout the vessel. So as I go up in frequency, so we hit a resonance. And you see, I hope everyone can see this, but the polystyrene on this side is standing up, kind of over here, and staying still here. And on this side, that's caused because there's a small leak in it, and we've got some air blowing in because the speaker's moving back and forward. So that's just to look pretty, that end. Okay, so what I'm going to do is go up in frequency. So if the first mode is at 109 Hertz, I'm going to try doubling that. Okay, so this is the second mode. So we have 0 pressure here, 0 pressure here. and then a region here with high intensity. And you can see that because the styrofoam balls are being moved around. Now the next gets a bit more interesting. So you can see a dead region here, dead region there, and the active region in the center. So, interestingly, this is exactly how the ear works. So the inner part of the ear called the cochlea, that detects sound, is much like this, and it has hairs running along the length of it. And it detects where the fluid in the ear is being vibrated, much like these styrofoam balls are. Okay. Now, I've automated them, okay? So your ear, hearing this sound, is actually working in a very similar way. And the speed so ear is a very clever thing. You know, it's quite remarkable that it's able to take all of that information and then convert that into a sound. Okay, but that's not really seeing sound. That's seeing the effect of sound. It's seeing sound move an object. Now, here's a jump jet, and what it's doing is traveling faster than the speed of sound. You may have seen this before. What is happening is, because the plane is moving faster than the speed of sound, the air in front of the plane isn't able to move out the way before it. So what happens is the density, the pressure of the air in front of the plane builds up and builds up and builds up. And because the pressure changes, the moisture in the air can no longer stay there, and the moisture condenses into a cloud. So if this whizzed past you, you'd hear it as a sonic boom. This is the same idea. So this is a plane breaking the speed barrier, the speed of sound barrier. And you can see quite an interesting thing. I hope you can see it through the yellow. What's happening is that because the air is building up a higher pressure, it's changing the refractive index of the air. And the light from behind the plane is being bent. So there are regions where the intensity of the light is brighter and dimmer than others. So what you're seeing there is a pressure wave, or a shock wave, which is also kind of what sound is. You know, most sounds that we hear are oscillations, but this is still sound. This is still a pressure variation in air. So this is something called FLIR imaging. So it was developed a while ago, and what you can do with it is you can visualize changes in refractive index. So much like that plane, but you can do it in the laboratory. On the left, we have a kettle showing you the heating effect, and on the right there's a bullet showing the sonic boom as the bullet propagates. So you might wonder how this is done. So what you do is you have a camera at the top, and you put in front of that camera a blade, and you obscure half the lens. Okay, and then on the bottom you have a good light source that's collimated. So imagine all the lights coming up at the same angle. It's much like a series of lasers, but the whole light is coming up, like a spotlight. Okay, and this has been done, and this is, you know, over the years, different videos have been, different kind of images and studies have been done with this. Here's something that was done by someone in collaboration with us, and it's looking at the radiation of a transducer. Well, a transducer is what us acoustic scientists like to call speakers, but this is kind of for ultrasonic frequencies. So calling it a speaker isn't quite correct. It's a transducer. So on the left we have a single hole in a metal plate, and the sound hits that and radiates through. And on the right we have a double slit. So this is much like the physics kind of experiments you might have done at school with ripple tanks. Okay. So here's another, and both of these videos, all of these videos, require a very complicated optical setup. It has to be very precise. You have a mirror in the far away, and it's very complicated basically. And the problem is that because it's so complicated, and you have to have this nicely collimated light source, which is very difficult to do, you can only really look at a small area. Okay, so we've been working on different measurement techniques. And one of the things that we came across was what's called the vibrometer. Now this is, basically it's a laser that fires out onto an object, and here's a bit of I'll try and explain this as best I can. So you've got a laser coming out, convenient. You have a laser coming out here that gets split. Now that gets sent to a detector, and it also gets sent out onto the object that you want to measure. And what happens is if light hits an object that's moving, the light gets pushed back, it gets reflected, and its phase has changed. So effectively its speed has changed. So this will recombine them, doing clever kind of light combinations, and it will look at the effect of that, and it will measure effectively the motion of the object. And this has been done, it's used for speakers, for looking at cars, for looking at panels and whatever. But it's always been used to look at the vibrations of surfaces. But what we decided to do was to kind of flip it on its head. We've got the vibrometer on the right and the speaker in the middle. And on the left, we have a retroreflective board. So a retroreflective board is like a street sign. So street signs are designed to reflect the majority of your headlights back so that they're clear. So what this does is when the laser hits it, it sends most of the light back to the laser vibrometer. And the key is the laser vibrometer needs loads of light to work properly. So what we've done is we've developed a really kind of sensitive setup. So we scan this laser in front of the speaker while the speaker is radiating sound. Okay? So what's happening, what we're able to do, so the retroreflector stays still, the vibrometer moves through the air, the laser follows a path. And the only thing that we're measuring is the change in the speed of the light because of the change of refractive index in the air. Okay, so these sound waves are moving through the air with their different pressure variations causing different refractive index changes, which causes bending of the light. So imagine you have this laser beam coming across here, hits a high pressure region, bends one way, hits a low pressure region, bends the other way, and then goes through this complex field and then goes over there. And because that's taken a non-direct path, its path length, the distance that it's flown, is effectively longer. So it takes slightly longer to go over to the retroreflector and then back into the laser. And these are very sensitive, so they're able to detect this and convert it into kind of a pressure map. So here are some results. So this is a classical speaker, quite a popular speaker back in recording days with the kind of golden era of studios. And it's always been regarded to be a very good speaker. But what we've been able to do, on the left, we have effectively a slowed down video of the sound radiating from the speaker. And on the right, we have a time averaged map of the left video. So the left shows you kind of the sound waves moving through, but we're not able to really kind of get a feel for what that really means. On the right, it's showing us where that speaker is intensely radiating sound. So if you've ever stood in front of a speaker, you'll notice that the high frequencies are often quite loud. Then you move around the back or to the side, and those high frequencies die off. And that's because high frequencies are usually much more directional. So the next video is an example of the difference between a speaker cabinet with straight edges, square edges, versus rounded edges. It's a very similar model of speaker, but the sharp edges on one speaker cabinet cause, on the right-hand side, you'll see these kind of what are called dead spots, where the sound isn't being radiated efficiently. And this is, you might think these are nice kind of scientific graphs and everything. But when you're listening to a pair of speakers and you have some speakers set up in front of you in your living room, and you've got one person sitting here and the other person sitting here, things like the directionality of speakers is really important, maybe for hi-fi enthusiasts, but generally there's kind of a need to make these things really omnidirectional, so they radiate evenly in a lot of directions. Now the next is something that we've been working on. I hope you can make this out. Using something called tomography, which is basically where we do those scans and we rotate the speaker around. So we do a scan for every degree. It takes a long time, but we can reconstruct that data into three-dimensional information. So we can actually get a three-dimensional map of sound radiating through air. And it's experimental data at the moment, so it's slightly limited in resolution, but you get the kind of impression. Now here's a couple of examples of some objects. So this is a typical lecture hall, so is this. But on this one, what we have are these things called diffusers that are around here. So up on the side of here, you have, this is absorption. So that's designed to basically absorb the sound and make it not too echoey in here. But sometimes people like spaces to have a bit of reverberation. And instead of putting these up, they put these up that's designed to scatter the sound when the sound hits them. But it's difficult to imagine how they work. It's a very clever kind of number sequence that basically, it's quite clever maths that makes these things radiate evenly. But what we can do is stick one in this technique. So on the left-hand one, I have a board on top, and on the right-hand one, we don't have the board. So you can see that the left-hand one gives you a very similar reflection. The right-hand one scatters or diffuses the sound. So it gives you kind of a way to visualize this. And here's a speaker radiating an impulsive sound and hitting the diffuser. Now, this is one of the laboratories that I'm quite often in. In fact, that's me. And on the walls, we have wedges, acoustic wedges, which are actually holding up this. Okay, so if you have a look at these, and they're soft, they're actually kind of similar to car seat material, that kind of foam. And people often say, why are they wedge-shaped? Why can't you just have flat walls? Surely it's the material that absorbs. But this just shows you that the shape of the wedge, the shape of the foam, affects how reflective it is. So on the left, we have two wedges that absorb the sound in, you don't get any reflection. And on the right, you have a flat wedge, you get very strong reflection. Okay, so my last section is ultrasound. Okay, so I promised that you'd be able to see sound. Okay, so hopefully you can make this out. But what we have here is an ultrasonic transducer, so that's radiating sound into water. Now these are used to heat up and kill cancerous tissue, and that's work that we're doing that's not related to this. But we can use this technique to visualize the ultrasonic sound fields. So you don't see anything here, we've got these lines behind it. But here, this is taken with a regular camera. No special tricks, no lasers. You can see that the lines have been affected, and here's a blow-up. Okay, so with an optimized pattern, which in fact turns out to be a series of rainbow strips, so this is effectively the way that a laser line would move through. It hits the ultrasonic field, the acoustic field, and it gets bent and streaked. That's the kind of thing you can get. And that is using a piece of paper with a pattern printed on it and a webcam. Okay. So hopefully I've convinced you a couple of ways that we're able to see sound, and hopefully there'll be some improved techniques for medical and industrial applications in the future. Thank you for listening.